This presentation seeks to make explicit the fact that restoring monuments that have endured for centuries calls for a delicate and complex know-how linked to the science of restoration, but that it's also necessary to restore the condition for the emergence of vernacular buildings and the real uses of such buildings in a very specific context. In order to complete this work, the restoration architect must also wear the hat of anthropologist who listen to the walls as much as to the people. The aim is to observe the stonework, which has proved its durability over time while understanding the use and spatial practices that elucidated this constructed form. In these architectural monuments are indeed threatened with absorption by modernity, one must still avoid a false view, that of these, or nostalgic archaeological view, that of the reconstruction of a glorious past, to question the dynamic analysis for an object that is very much alive. The granary in Morocco, it's much alive. It's alive. And this is a specific thing who we can speak about, and this in the context of the granary, Moroccan granary, actually Moroccan granary. While the fifth knell of the granary sound in the 1930 by the colonial doxa, it is nevertheless still in use, or at least the most accessible granaries and the most remote ones. The granary remains a necessity. Impoverished community, of course, poor communities, whose collective strength is vital to guarantee a minimum standard of living for this old agrarian society of the Amazigh Mountains. Although declining, the institution of the granary endures. In the Atlas Mountain and the high pre-Saharan valley of southern Morocco, the fear of tomorrow, together with the fear of surprise attack, formerly united communities in the face of danger. In this land of hunger and thirst, grain was fundamental, and protecting it would assure the life of the group. In the past, it was locked up in impregnable citadel, collective granaries called Irem or Agadir, depending of the region. This is why it is believed now that times are more favorable and people can access various sources of supply, that the institution would have become obsolete. The granaries are dead, like in the rest of North Africa, that they are nothing more than a heap of old faded stones. But on the contrary of this vision, over the last 2 decades, we have been able to observe more than 100 active granaries in the Central Atlas, in the High Atlas, in the Anti-Atlas. My PhD was between 200 to 208, and I have seen that in this period. and we have endeavored whenever possible to restore them in attempts to ensure the survival of these common assets, emblematic of both the kingdom and this region. This is why we must first ask how this North African institution has survived in the continent that has many forms of granary for grain, while the comparison to the granaries of Dogon, for example, of the granaries of Burkina Faso, of the Benin today, is interesting. Those are all lineal or family granaries, whereas the Atlas granary is the product of a complex collective like a small tribe. This is why we must be wary of false similarities and trust the specific character of the collective granary, which appears first and foremost as an institution of the common good. How has the collective granaries survived in Morocco when he has died or out for good everywhere else in the Maghreb? Because it's a sacred entity, holy place, and because of her practices were associated of these assets. Traditionally considered sacred places, these warehouses are always surrounded by diverse practices referring to the baraka. The baraka is in Arabic and in the special area of mountain in Morocco, it's the multiplication of divine providence, which is now less about the idea of old agrarian cults linked to the grain that defines Quranic concept of ni'ma. Ni'ma in Arabic. Ni'ma are cereal of bread, blessing, protection, little things out, protection, and the multiplication of the good. This diffuse baraka is very much present in the space of granary. It takes the form of various special arrangements ranging from the simple cell to the granary entrance to jar of donation on trucks of offering. The many opportunities to encourage donation is made when the user leaves the granary. He does not forget to leave behind a very small portion for the saints. Because the accumulation of these regular offerings makes it possible at the end of an agrarian cycle to amass a substantial quantity which is then distributed to the most destitute. The tutelary figures chosen and associated with these special devices are in fact supposed to activate or reactivate a benefic good, a benefic baraka, and guarantee protection for any home against the hazard of existence. Let us not forget that it was in these regions that the movement of aesthetic sense was born during the 15th and 16th centuries, giving rise to the institution of the zawya, and the greatest of whom played a major political role in Morocco from this period. In the Maghreb, the zawya why it's a venerated and sanctified tomb of a holy man or woman, to which a mosque and Quranic teaching rooms have been added. The members of the mountain granaries are thus networked with the Great Southern Zawya, to which they pay homage every year, renewing their allegiance through gifts and sacrifices at large festive gatherings. The practices attached to these societies concerned with pooling scarce and complementary resources of grain. Those who produce oil or grain can exchange the fruits of the earth for the fruits of animal husbandry, meat and wool, and live together in mutual understanding. This line of the gifts, it's like a networking from granaries to the zawya. A lot of granaries in a map to one or two or three zawya in the south of Morocco area. True, in a depth studies over time, and in some 50 places among several tribes, and in a parallel with the analysis of 1,000 others in more far-flung locations, we have discovered the vitality of an eminently sacred institution. The field showed that the Agadir was not a relic of another age, the vital archaism of colonial theory, but rather the central marker of the social, territorial, and symbolic organization of a wide communities network that very often beyond the immediate local communities. These granaries, seemingly doomed, are still alive 100 years later. The granary was and remained a fixed place where agreements are still renewed, manifested through a series of gifts involving collective obligation of rights and duties. These granaries, sanctified by the great saint, still have his compartments, which are real the other sense of that particular locality. The compartment is usually placed in the entrance and has a box for offering the passage and the door on the other side to empty it. For any new instance of storage and any withdrawal, the members would deposit a handful of barley, a measure of dates, or more or less substantial part of what is stored in the reserves. We have observed this ritual among to the Ibercacan, the Ilalen, all tribe of Atlas, Middle Atlas, but mostly by elderly actors, including women. The showers of offering, called tirbain in Tashahit language, are considered a duty of believer placed squarely within the framework of the zakat, the purifying legal almsgiving in the Quranic thesis in the Muslim religion. In conclusion, because the time is In conclusion, you can say if a renewal of these places take its meaning in the depth of a history, it also confronts more contemporary questions. The essential problem at work today can be summed by the idea of both a dwindling of traditional practice and, paradoxically, the true renewal. The sacredness of the granary has been gradually replaced by a new sacred identity that the intentional monument, thus opening the door to heritage as it is classically conceived in Europe. At present, the practices are tending to change into what we can recognize as the cult of the monument, that is to say, to the birth of an heritage emptied of its practices of use and now largely identified with modernity. The places remain the same, but the use has changed. May this vitality not disappear into the nothingness of folklorization through the introduction of mass tourism of these high cultural places, or to a restoration to the walls that does not grasp the complexity to the social fabric that gives them structure. An ethic of doing must be established in order to avert the definitive end to these understandings of the common good that are the granaries of the Atlas. To defend an architecture of the common goods means to question the architectural object by favoring the social condition of its construction, as well as the use and spatial practices that are specific to it in order to understand and restore it accordingly, but not just the walls. Thank you very much.